And welcome to my resonant energy therapy counselor reacts to books first video. I'm so glad that you've found this out of the thousand videos that you could be watching on the internet. Anyways, welcome you to my quiet little corner of the world. I invite you to also grab a cup of tea. Reading is sexy. And come hang out for a little while. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Lucy Nesbitt. I use she, they pronouns. I'm located in so-called Edmonton, where I work as a wellness counselor and also sometimes a life coach and life skills workshop facilitator. I'm also a musician, play the French horn and the piano and the ukulele sometimes. I teach music. I do a lot of early childhood music education. And yeah, I'm a private practice counselor here. I do virtual sessions and in-person sessions here in Edmonton. And when I'm not doing all of those work things, I like to read. And as you can imagine, reading after having trained to be a therapist takes on a little bit of a different lens. So I thought it might be interesting to combine the two. Since I really love therapy and I really love reading, why not put them together and maybe provide a bit of resource for some people, and also just talk about books, because I love talking about books. Now you may be asking, what book are we going to talk about? We're only going to talk about a little bit of it, but we are going to be looking at A Soul of Ash and Blood today, by Jennifer L. Armentrout, part of the Blood and Ash from Blood and Ash series. Like, non-ironically, completely love this book series. Anyway, so if you haven't read any of these things, and you're gonna, which depending on who you are, your age, and your interests, you should, there will be some spoilers. Things we learned kind of at the end of From Blood and Ash about Hawk. Yeah, so proceed with caution. But before we get into all that, this seems like a very good time to talk about content to do with therapy and mental health on the internet, which is like the most important part, I think, of my job, is making sure that I'm representing what I'm talking about, like, correctly. And also, yeah, like, need to be honest with you, because I see so much content on the internet that I love about mental health and about self-care and like well-being, stuff like this. But the thing is, like, they always say it's not a replacement for therapy or for like mental health support. But like, why? And I would like to talk about that before I even remotely get into this, no matter how fun, because it's going to be fun, but also not, it's a bit of both. So when we're consuming content about our well-being on the internet, the reason why it's so vastly different from one-on-one therapy or like having a conversation with a friend or a doctor or somebody, anyone, a mentor, an elder, someone who like knows and is sharing with us, is that it's not a relationship. So I can only speak to being a therapist, really, a music teacher. Therapy is inherently a relationship. That is like the first thing, one of the first things I was taught, that and to be unconditionally kind. Therapy is a dynamic exchange between people, two people, a group of people, whatever. But it is a healing relationship. When we're consuming content on the internet, I mean, I'm alone in my bedroom. Well, it's my guest room, but it's my office. I'm alone in here. I'm not talking to you. I am now. I'm not talking to the guys doing construction outside. I'm not talking to my partner. I'm talking to myself, and I'm talking about the things that I believe in my little container here, which is completely different than when I'm talking to this camera and a client is sitting there, because we're in an exchange together. Now, as a therapist, like, I'm not processing my material when I'm in that relationship, but I am here as an active sounding board to experience what's being said to me, run it through as many filters as I possibly can to get some information to then relay and connect and empathize back with the person sitting in front of me. The other thing is that most of the times in therapy, we're not using tools. I'm not saying to you, hey, have you ever tried meditating? Or have you ever considered going for a walk? Like, no, that's not how therapy works. Therapy is a process of me hearing what you have to say and giving you as much time and space on that as possible. So I can't do that when I'm providing just blanket statement resources to the internet. And that's the other thing, as a therapist, I'm taught never, ever give a blanket statement because there's no such thing as one size fits all. We're very unique, each one of us. Some of us have had experiences that were similar to one another, and so we get shaped very similarly. And that's fine. Usually that's why we connect with certain friends or certain colleagues or certain therapists, because it's like, oh yeah, you've been through something similar, so I know that we can relate and we can kind of understand. But no one's ever going to live in your mind. No one is ever going to experience the world the way you do, because we're all special. We're all our own unique creations. So it's really important when consuming mental health literature or secondary or tertiary articles about mental health on the internet to remember that, first of all, it's not source material unless it is, and you're specifically watching a YouTube video from the expert on that, which I'm not. That can be a source material, but often that's not the research that was done, right? That's someone relaying the research that was done. So there's that. And the other thing to consider is that it's not being dynamically catered to you, right? It's not, I heard you say something to me that I ran through my mental filters from my training, and I'm now producing this material to give to you specifically unique for you. So you're not getting therapy because you're not getting a relationship. And part of what we're going to talk about today is how important relationship is to help us to recover, to heal, to make sense of things, to identify and connect. But yeah, so we really need to use our critical thinking skills while we're engaging with content on the internet that we're trying to use for ourselves. So what I would invite you to try is what we talk about today, which if you're interested in it, because the topic is going to be a little heavy. So if you have got enough from this video and you want to end now, that's fine too. But I want you to kind of consider, okay, this is material that Lucy specifically is giving to me through Lucy's point of view, through Lucy's filters still. I'm still wearing my counselor hat. But how could this be relevant to me? And also, how could this not be relevant to me? What does this have to do with me? I want you to try running it through your filters too, to run it through your critical thinking skills so that you can make the most of this. Take the curiosity that you might have or the connection that you might feel, take that, bring that to a friend. Be like, hey, I watched this video and I got these ideas and I think this might be happening for me. What do you think? And they will hopefully hear you and go, well, what do you think? And then we can really start to connect in that way. I hope that makes some sense. I'm really looking forward to doing this. Actually, this is already pretty fun for me. So know that this is a real passion project of mine. I'm really stoked to be doing this with you, whoever you are, wherever you are. Hope you will connect with me. And shall we get into some books? Okay. I also am not paid to talk about any of these books. I'm not endorsed in no way, shape, or form. And in no way, shape, or form do I endorse everybody watching these videos to read them. They are, again, you know what's best for yourself. Read at your discretion. Read at your leisure. Have fun. This is a very fun book. At least I think it will be. It's a bit spicy. So I also don't endorse or support or any of the things but I do have a Kindle, and that is where my book is, because I got it on sale. So I'm not most of the way through, okay? So if you've read all of it, please don't tell me how it ends. Well, I know how it ends because this is a retelling of the first book. But already I am reading and I'm like, oh my gosh, I needed to have checked myself a long time ago. Because yeah, there's things happening that I judged, and I judged incorrectly. Alright, let's get into it. So first things first, content warnings. So I'm just looking through this one. A lot of authors these days are putting content warnings ahead of these kind of new adult novels that deal with certain topics, to make sure that readers kind of know what they're about to get themselves into. And in this book, we also have one. So there's a note to the reader after the pronunciation guide, which is getting incredibly long at this point. I don't even know. It's fine. But yeah, the content warning says, note to the reader, while the lives of those written on these pages are fictional, what they experience occurs in life outside these pages, myself included. For that reason, please be aware that there are discussions surrounding self-harm and abuse. Please know that you do not need to hurt. There is help. Visit crisistextline.org, which is just like, Crisis Text Line is so I'm in Canada. It's the US version of Good to Talk. They're like enmeshed. So when I trained to do volunteer crisis responding with Good to Talk, I trained through Crisis Text Line because it's the bigger organization, I suppose. And this is my first line of defense. If I have any concern or worry, I'm running things through my filters, and I think for my clients, I'm like, if you need help before we can talk, go to Good to Talk, Crisis Text Line. So I just think that that's a really beautiful dedication. And Crisis Text Line, like, I use Good to Talk. I use that myself. There have been moments where a few years ago when I was really quite severely depressed, and not doing very well. I'm about to do my content warnings, but I would text them. I texted them. So I don't know, it feels kind of special as a reader to see, the author I'm reading, first of all, to hear like, oh shit, like, okay, like you've been through some stuff. Like, she's sharing that vulnerably with us, not just through her characters, but also through herself, right? That's quite vulnerable. And I've done the same thing. I've gone to the same resource. It just, I don't know, it takes some of the, takes the edge off for me a little bit. I think it's kind of special. Talk about relationship, there's a way for her to cross from something that isn't really relational with the author to making it quite relational with you, because she's shared that vulnerability with you and she's connected with you. So, as Jennifer Armentrout has mentioned in her dedication, we're going to be talking about self-harm today. Also going to be talking about addiction, talking about behaviors to help with pain, different types of pain, why people use pain. And I wanted to talk about that in regards to this particular book, because when I read it, I could tell that she'd experienced it and that she understood what it was about. And I think a lot of people do talk about self-harm, and they often talk about it in regards with suicide ideation. They're not the same thing. And I think that this is an important learning piece, both for people who are experiencing, but also for people who are relating with folks that are experiencing this. If someone you love or someone you know is experiencing or using self-harm, it can be really important to have had a frank discussion, or at least heard a frank discussion, about what we understand self-harm to be and what folks who use self-harm have expressed self-harm to be. And we can do that by using books. So, lovely to have a dedication there, and also a bit of a warning about what's to come. So, let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about what we can see here. So, in this book, and part of what I was kicking myself for was from Blood and Ash, Hawk is established as the hot guy. He just is. That's just what he's established as. He's got attitude. He's got a real chip on his shoulder. He knows he's hot. He tells people, he's like, I'm hot. And, it gets very sexy very fast, and he, like, comes on pretty strong. But, like, she's into it. So it's like, okay, I think I'm into it. But what I kind of picked up on this reading Soul of Blood and Ash is how much, like, I allowed myself to see him as two-dimensional, especially because later in the series we realize that he's been held captive and tortured for 50 years. Sounds familiar. Perhaps we need a reset point of view. But we haven't heard it from his point of view ever until much, much later in the series, in which point, like, it's addressed that he's been tortured, and it's addressed like he's very compassionate to Poppy about her nightmares, and we understand that, like, okay, you've been through some shit. But I think it's really easy, at least it was really easy for me, to see men who are, like, inherently in their sexuality and just take that at face value, regardless of what we know about them, and thinking that these behaviors are, like, just because they want to be hot. And I think, Lucy, that was a problematic decision on your point to make that call. So I was reading this and I cried a little bit because I haven't personally experienced self-harm using cutting. I've used pain a little bit from time to time, mostly when I get really, like, worked up, or, like, it's like so much to feel. That's when, like, if I'm having a really bad time, I might do, like, a little bit of palm pinching, or, like, sometimes I've been known to, like, hit myself in the head, which I really try to curb because my body doesn't really deserve to be injured by me or by anyone. So I try to respect my boundary on that, especially when I get feeling, like, compelled to take it out on myself, which is usually how mine works. So it's not really self-harm. It's more self-abuse at that point. So we're doing better on that. But yeah, it was really fascinating. So I was reading, and let me read a little bit to you. Lifting my hands, I pressed my fingers against my temple instead of what I'd done in the past too many times to count, when I was alone and the memories wouldn't go away, when the thoughts wouldn't stop coming. Oof, I feel that, right? Like, how many times are we just, like, trying to get through our day, and it's just, like, onslaught after onslaught of things that have happened to us, or just, like, whatever it might be. For him, he's talking about a trauma, something that's occurred where he was really severely abused, and he's, like, reliving that, which is, when someone's experiencing PTSD, flashbacks are, like, one of the most common things that can occur. Again, blanket statement, your experience does not have to include flashbacks for it to qualify for PTSD, right? But that's something that we can kind of notice and be like, oh shoot, like, that's probably what's going on. And then he talks about pleasure wasn't the only temporary escape, there was also pain. And so, this character is talking a lot about, later on he mentions, I'm gonna swear, and the countless nameless and faceless bodies I'd been with in those dark years afterwards, Atlantean mortal, women, men, those I fucked just to prove to myself that I decided who touched me and who I touched, right? So, what we hear in there is, like, sex, release, sensation, those things come into play, but kind of like an overarching thing that occurs with self-harm, because risk-taking behavior is also a component of self-harm, or at least it can be, right? Gambling, unsafe sex like we're kind of seeing described here. A lot of times it comes down to us trying to take a fragmented version of reality due to a trauma and to regain a sense of control, right? A sense of control, a sense that, like, I still sit in the driver's seat of my life, and I can feel that. I can physically feel and experience that I am in control of my life. because trauma takes us non-consensually and puts us through something that we can't escape. So that, I think, is what really resonated with me when I was reading from Hawk Castillo, spoilers, point of view, is just the need to know that I still matter and that I'm still in charge of my life, right? So the other thing he says then, there's also pain. He mentions, if my skin scarred as easily as a mortal's, my arms would be a course map that led the way to all the times I'd sought to feel something, anything, but what those memories dredged up. Yeah, that's rough, right? A lot of times is this idea of needing to feel something, needing to feel anything. So where self-harm is an opportunity for us to feel like we're in control, or we're still in a position of power, even over ourselves, and our decisions. It's also sometimes an opportunity for people to feel something, like Castile says, like anything. Because a lot of times after a trauma, and our nervous system is like perceiving, our nervous system, our brain, all of the systems are just looking for threat all the time, because at this point they've come to expect it. And this is something that we see a lot of the times, is that in certain circumstances, traumatic circumstances, the reason they are traumatic is because it goes from feeling perfectly safe to being devastatingly not safe in like a split second, or over the course of many experiences. For example, if someone is experiencing an abuse in the home with someone that they were a family member, they were raised to trust, that recurrent, I trust you, but you're hurting me. I trust you, but you're hurting me. We learn. Our bodies learn. We learn how to adapt to say, I trusted this, and now I'm hurt. I'm not safe. I'm being violated in some way, shape, or form, right? So a result of that can be sometimes a quick to escalate, to be flooded with an emotion, and another option can be to numb out. And this sounds a little bit like what our character is dealing with here, is just like, I need to numb out because I'm not feeling anymore. I've had to shut down. My surroundings taught me I need to shut down, and I'm sitting here with nothing. So let's pause here, because that's a lot, right? That's a lot of information. And it's also a lot of, if you are feeling this way and resonating with this, that's a scary way to feel. That's a really scary way to feel like you're not safe in your environment, where your environment is being perceived as a threat, no matter where you are, what's going on, and to feel like you can't feel anything anymore. So here's where I just want to let you know that when people are using a self-harming behavior, they are doing the best that they can with the resources that they have available to them. Okay? It's not gross. It's not scary. It's not bad at all. There's no such thing as good and bad when we're talking about stuff like this. There is effective and safe. Self-harm might not be safe for you, because as much as it feels in control, there's moments when things can slip up. There's moments where we might get too lax. There's moments when things are out of our control, and the means that we're using to feel something or to feel control aren't safe for us anymore, and we could get hurt past the point that we were prepared to get hurt. There's nothing bad about you. There's nothing bad about the folks that need to use self-harm. Something else that we see Castile talking about, let me just find it and read it to you, is shame, right? Let's find it. Let's read it. Here we go. I smoothed my hand over my hair. Sometimes the sex, drugs, and drinking didn't silence those feelings, the memories, so that's when I ... My throat sealed up. Words failed me. A pause. No, the words hadn't failed me. They were still there, pushing against my lips. What stopped them was the ... the God's awful shame, even after all these years. even though I knew what they'd done to me and what I'd been forced to do to others wasn't my fault. Shame, right? There's a heck of a stigma around suicide and shame. And self-harm. And I think we need to drop those, especially those of us who are supporting our loved ones. It's scary, right? When someone admits to us or acknowledges, like, you know, you get the like, oh shit, like I don't know what to do with that. Go talk to your friends, right? Connect with people. If you're feeling scared of talking about that or seeing that, or, well, not necessarily seeing that, that's a different kind of thing, but having the conversations around it. Let's go tend to you. Let's go tend to your feelings. Let's get you feeling okay, because this person's just told you something that they're ashamed of, most likely, or that they think is bad or dirty or wrong. Not bad or dirty or wrong. Just maybe a little bit hard on yourself, hard on your body when you're trying to recover. You're trying to get through something, right? You're trying to heal. You're trying to feel. Let's try feeling in some safe ways so that you can continue your journey, continuing your growth. Shame keeps people really quiet. Shame is like one of the most sinister things because it's like a self-imposed and sometimes societally enforced thing. And it doesn't have to be there, because as soon as we air out like, hey, this is what I'm going through, that's when we can start to get the light in, and that's when we can start to dry up these feelings a little bit. We can start to rework with them, negotiate a little bit. So there's that. Shame, yeah. It's okay to talk about it, especially to someone who's trained to talk about these things, right? Someone who has already worked on their nervous system's reactivity to a perceived threat, right? That harm is there. But that's where we can start to cast the light in, dry it up a little bit, and reshape it, renegotiate with the way that you've learned to survive, because you're doing the best you can. But I wonder if new variables were here, if there was new possibilities, if there's something different you could do. Okay, let's take it back to our boy Cass. Hawk. He's still Hawk at this point. So he talks about it here, just on the same page. That it offered him clearness, a little clarity there to use pain. That's another really common thing, that you feel clear. It clears away what you were thinking about initially. So that's an important thing to know. However, as Castile and Jennifer point out, the thing is, it didn't last. It was only another escape, except now I was hurting myself instead of another hurting me. You'd think I would have realized that right off the bat, but it took getting it out. It took talking. And he also says that, it sounds cliche as fuck, which it does, but what I think is more important is on this next page, he says, of course, talking hadn't been an immediate miracle fix. Talking that shit out took time, a whole lot of redirection. It took being honest, which wasn't always easy when the natural reaction was to say I was okay, even when a storm was waiting to ignite on the inside, right? This is a super important caveat, is that we can talk about these things. Sometimes talking isn't right. Sometimes talking takes a really long time to express the depth of what we're feeling. It's not just self-harm. It's not just pain management. It's a whole lot more. And you, if you're experiencing this, you know that, right? Or if you have experienced this in the past, you know that it's like a million moments stacked up on top of each other to the point where you can't deal with that feeling. And you're trying your best to deal with it. So it's okay if you don't want to talk about it, or if talking about it is a really like flooding experience for you, if that's too much. So let's we'll take a moment, I think, here, just like regulate ourselves, take some deep breaths. We're empathizing with someone who's gone through something that we can relate with, or that we have understood or have done in the past. Whew. It's hard. That's why I cried when I was reading it, because I get it. And it's sad to know that I've felt that way. And it's sad to know that I might feel that way again in the future, right? So let's just take a little moment, just vibe with that he's the one going through that right now. We don't have to be doing that right now. Okay? And let's talk about what we can do, right? What can we do? Because there are so many possibilities available to us, and we're in this discussion, or at least I'm in this discussion with my computer, so we can find some possibilities here. Have that possibility, right? Talking to somebody. Now, okay, why? Why do we talk about it? So, the first thing I think of as to why we can talk about things that hurt and why that processes it is primarily just because, like, if, how to describe? When something goes unseen and it just festers inside of us, it tends to get a little bit more powerful because it hasn't gotten anything from anybody. Like, it's just thriving in there. It's like if you have something like damp and like it's covered and it's gonna get all like moldy. But if you take that and you put it outside in the sunshine, it dries it up. It doesn't get so moldy. I think that shame thrives in silence, and it also thrives because it keeps us silent, which is a very powerful thing. It's trying to keep us protected in a way of being like, hey, like, don't let anybody see this. This is risky. You might get ostracized from the group if someone doesn't like what they see. But more than not, that doesn't happen too much. More often than not, when someone, you say, hey, like, this happened to me, and I'm like mourning that is part of my story, and I'm sad. More often than not, people are going to be like, yeah, of course you'd be sad. Of course you'd be upset. Of course you'd be mourning for that. That's an awful thing to have happen. So, that's what Castile, he's doing. He talks to Kieran. Kieran says to him, you weren't selfish, Cass. You were in pain. There's so much we could unpack with their relationship there. I'll save it for another time. But that's a really beautiful example. Now, I also want to let you know that if talking's not your thing and you're not ready yet to go, here's my stuff, please receive me, that's okay. Like, that's fine. What we can do is we can start little nuggets that feel right for you along the way. So, especially too, if you're supporting someone, don't expect that they're going to want to talk about this right away. Okay? If someone discloses to you, hey, I'm self-harming and I have trauma, don't be like, okay, tell me everything. Be like, what do you need? How can I support you in this? They might not know yet. That's okay. You're allowed to take your time with your healing. Oh my gosh. That's like the most okay thing in the world. So if it helps, here's some ideas of things that can be tried. We heard about talking. We heard about texting good to talk as well. There's someone who doesn't know you. Someone who you're probably never going to talk to again. Who you can hold some space for you. So there's a kind of neutral option if you're looking to talk. You can write things down. If writing's not your jam, you can do a voice note in your phone. And if communicating it feels too much, we can start really small and do a little bit of art. You could draw a little something on a page with the intention of it being a bit of the emotion, like 1%. The next day you could draw a little something that's like 2%. The day after that, maybe a 5%. You can get some tools. You could get some clays. I always have clay. And you can just, you can do anything with art, right? You can, especially if we're talking about self-harm, if what you're using involves blades, we can use color, right? We can use some color play to give you a little bit of sensation and similarity. Clay is a really, really cool one because it's so malleable and it takes a little bit, like, you can put something into that. Music. Listening to music, making sound. Making sound is a very powerful thing, says the music teacher. You know, what does agony feel like? What does numbness sound like? What instrument is it on? What song do you hear it in? What color is it? There's a lot of resources out there for what to do if you would like to stop self-harming. I'm not going to give those to you right now. That could be a little bit too triggering. Talking about it's one thing, seeing things is another. So you're welcome to reach out to me. My email and contact is all going to be in the comments. If you're in need of support or want to try some tools, feel free to reach out or let me know that you're looking for them and I'd send them to you. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good place to end. Do what's right for you. Know that you already have been doing the best that you can. And you're not selfish. You're not bad. Shame, like is telling Hawk, shame might make it feel like you're bad. You can't be. You're not. Bad things may have happened to you. That's true. And you are still a very good person. So there we go. We've talked about a pretty heavy subject here. And a good book, you know? I think it's important to remember two additional follow-ups to this is that, you know, it's really easy to judge a book by its cover with people and behaviors that people have. So know that we don't know everything. We don't know what somebody's going through a lot of the time. We really don't. But we can do our best to have compassion for their behavior. If they're hurting us, we need to set boundaries. If they're hurting themselves, or if they're careless about themselves, we can get curious and we can give more compassion there. But yeah, something to think about. And the other thing to think about too is like, you know, one of the things that Castile is talking about is that he's hurt people. And that is where a lot of his trauma comes from. There's a book called, I'm going to show you, The Body Keeps the Score. I'm only halfway through this book because it's heavy. But they talk about, a lot of times, some of the more severe cases of PTSD that were seen in veterans. This is research done by those that I don't know their name, but collected by Bessel van der Kolk. A lot of the like severe cases was when people have harmed others. What they did to somebody can really harm us. So we can take that to whatever scale on the spectrum suits you. But sometimes the things that we feel worst about haunt us the most when we've messed something up or we feel like we've done something wrong. So you're not alone in that either. And it doesn't determine that you do or don't have, you know, something going on for yourself. When you've made a mistake, you're still allowed to feel what you feel about it when you've done something, right? That's when shame keeps us even more quiet. So I would invite you to, if you have a quiet shame inside you, see if we can't make it a little bit noisier, huh? Let's see if we can't get it a little bit louder, get it out in some way, cast a little bit of light on it, and see how that feels for you. But anyway, so there's part 1 of our Counselor looks at a specific topic presented in a book. I hope that was in some way helpful or useful or enlightening or a connection point in some way. Like I said, I will be putting all my information in the comments section of this video. Feel free to do with this what you will. Yeah, on to maybe we'll do some relationship stuff in our next ones. Who can say what we'll do? But we'll just stumble across them as I stumble across them. And if you have requests too for books or topics to discuss, hit me up. We'll see you again soon. Bye.